Just waiting for people to join in. Hello, hi Meera ma'am. We're just waiting for a few more people to join in, and then probably in another 2 minutes we'll start off with the session.
Yes, sure. Hi,
Hello,
Meera. Good
hi.
evening.
Nix is right here. Probably she'd be doing video bombing. Nixu, come on. Acha. I'm calling you. Say hi. Hi. Oh, no, no. So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of DogSpot Live series. I am Srishti Sharma. I am the founder of Petarchy, and today we have with us Delano Henriques. He is a certified canine trainer, and he's been training since 2006. And he has basically attended various workshops and seminars across US with a lot of international trainers, and he is a Rottweiler enthusiast, and he's been keeping Rottweilers since 2000, if I'm not wrong.
You're
And
right.
at the moment he has 5 Rotties and 3 Mali. So I'll just hand it over to Delano so that he can introduce himself. So Delano, over to you.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Delano Henriques. Like Shisti said, I've been training since 2006. It's been a passion turned into profession. And right now, my focus is on canine citizen, a good canine citizen.
Right,
So basically, living in the city, basically living in the city, we come across several problems faced by canine owners. And that's because there's no proper structure, and also owners don't kind of take the time out to train their dogs. So it's very important to have a good canine citizen for everybody in the society to be happy, you know
that's true.
yeah, including your family members, I mean.
Right,
So having a well trained dog is a priority.
that's
I,
pretty much true. Yeah.
yes.
Yes, yes.
So
Sorry, you were saying something.
yeah, sorry. So a good canine citizen is not, just a dog doing tricks or a sport dog only. Your dog has to be well behaved in society, so people,
Correct.
even who don't like dogs, will see that dog as a harmless creature and not
That's true.
a nuisance.
Right,
So it's very
right. So
important to give, yeah, it's very important to give the right message out there also.
right. Right. Yeah, so that's actually, you pretty well explained it. So, canine good citizen, as you correctly have mentioned, that, it's not just about getting home a dog and, having a pet alongside. It's more of about teaching the dog, right etiquettes and right manners, that basically the basic, dog etiquettes that they're supposed to know. Like how we raise a human kid, we would want a human kid to, behave in a certain way, meet people in a certain way, socialize in a certain way. Similarly, when we're raising a dog, it's, I think, more or less the exact same thing, that we have to make sure that the dog is also well behaved. The dog knows how to interact when the owner is around. The dog knows how to interact even when the owner is not around. When probably the dog has been taken to a dog park, or probably some pet friendly cafe, or some place where the dog, it's new for the dog basically should be aware of and should be trained for how to meet people, how to socialize with people, how to behave in different environments. So yes, that I think is very important these days. Instead of, as you correctly mentioned, that instead of focusing more on fancy tricks like roll and bang, that all of those, obviously we can train the dog for all of those, but eventually the dog has to behave in a certain way first, and then probably as add-ons we can teach all the tricks and commands to the dogs.
Yeah, you're very right. And it actually all starts from the house. Like we
True.
say with even with our kids, behavior first starts in the house. When
Right.
I'll just give you a simple example. Like when you have a small puppy, every time you get home, you're so excited. You want to greet the puppy first, because you missed it.
Correct.
And then that
Correct.
puppy turns 25, 30 kgs, and she's jumping on everybody who comes to the door, and
Right.
then it becomes a nuisance. But
Right.
you have actually started that habit. It's not the puppy.
Correct, correct. Yeah. So,
So
since we're talking about that, like, can you also, help the viewers understand that how a dog is supposed to, behave in presence of various strangers. So let's say, taking it for example, a situation where someone has come over at our place, be it our friends or relatives, or someone from the our neighborhood has dropped over. So how do we train the dog to, firstly, what do we expect from the dog, and how do we train the dog to behave in that certain way? Like, if you could share out few pointers for that.
yeah, sure. See, when you start with basic obedience, I mean, first we always start in the house. You need
Right,
to teach the puppy to be calm.
right,
Go and greet strangers in a calm manner. And
right.
obviously, it also involves you telling the other person not to react to the puppy. When the
Correct,
puppy is hyper. So that
correct.
matters a lot. So first,
Right,
teach your puppy to be calm, sit calmly. When the puppy is sitting calmly, then only he should be greeted. So
correct,
automatically, the puppy learns that when he exhibits calm behavior, then he gets rewarded.
correct.
But this is a process of conditioning which happens.
Right.
It'll not happen over 1 2 days maybe, but you
Definitely.
have to keep it up. Uh,
Definitely, definitely.
yeah. So generally, a puppy takes around say a month or two to kind of get to know all these basic commands which are there, and
Right,
the puppy will start reacting in a good way only if the house people are practicing.
right. That's true.
But that is very
That's true.
important. That I mean, like we say, the owner or the handler should be part of the training,
Correct,
and
correct.
they have to, like, as a trainer or a behaviorist, you go into the house and you are teaching them something, but it is
Right,
on the owner and the handler to make it behavior, because they are
right,
going to be doing it 24/7 with the dog.
right,
So like every time somebody comes to the door, they need to make the puppy sit down, wait, open the door, or if they have guests coming in the house, you
right,
know let the puppy go up calmly, greet the puppy.
right.
So this all has to be done in a proper process for the puppy to get it.
Correct. And also, adding on to that, it is also very important that the pup should not be overexcited all the time, to meet the stranger. So let's say the dog should also learn to be neutral whenever someone is coming in the house, or whenever the dog is out for a walk and some stranger approaches and is meeting the handlers. For example, if someday I am going and I've, for example, I've taken Nix for a walk and I meet some friend of mine who's coming and approaching, and trying to meet me and just greet me, and we're probably just exchanging a few words and stuff. Then at that point of time, it is very important that Nix is supposed to be extremely neutral. Any dog is supposed to be extremely neutral and completely ignore the person instead of being overexcited and showing over jumpiness of jumping and trying to paw the person or meet the person. The dog is supposed to, it needs to be trained to be extremely balanced and to not really jump on the person, but instead focus on the handler, on what the handler is expecting. So that is, I think, something very important that a lot of owners need to understand, because again, socialization, as in previous live sessions also we've discussed, that socialization doesn't always mean that the pup is supposed to, or the dog is supposed to always jump and greet the person. And even if, as you rightly mentioned, that even if the dog is trying to do that, there has to be a way about it. The dog probably has to go into a calmer sit or a down position, and then that is when probably the stranger or the third person would be petting the dog to reinforce that calmer behavior of the dog. So that, I think, is another very important pointer when we talk about accepting a friendly stranger around, whenever a dog basically encounters one. So yeah.
Right.
So
So like we were discussing, I think it starts from the very first time you get your puppy home. you know
right,
the early imprinting age is very, very important for a puppy.
right,
So you start this with a puppy from the time a puppy comes home. Now, every
right.
time you come back or a family member comes back, you don't directly greet the puppy.
Correct, correct.
Automatically the pup is not going to be longing for that attention.
Right,
So, say simple trick: you just carry some treats with you when you go out. When you come back, ask the puppy to sit first. You greet the puppy, pat him, then you reward the puppy. So this is a
right,
process everybody follows.
right.
Automatically, the pup learns to be calm before greeting anybody. And
Exactly.
once you go into the advanced conditioning stage, then you
Hmm.
take the puppy to different strangers. You do the same thing. You change the environment. From your
Right,
house, the puppy goes down.
right.
You have more distractions happening. So
Correct,
this is a
correct.
process which needs to be maintained with the puppy.
Correct. So, for example, let's say we just to train the pup to be, neutral or probably polite when meeting other strangers. You have, as you've pointed out, few exercises that the handler or the owner needs to perform when inside the house when there's least distraction. Similarly, if you could also suggest on pointers on how the handler needs to, handle the dog or the entire situation when now the dog is not inside the house but outside, let's say for walks or in some dog park. So how do we ensure that the dog behaves at that point of time, especially considering the major factor which a lot of pet parents talk about is loose leash walking. So I'm pretty sure you also as a trainer must have come across a lot of pet owners coming with us and coming to us and asking for helps and tips on how to make sure that the dog behaves outdoor when taken out for walks, and especially that the dog walks out on a loose leash. So if you could just also shed some light upon it and just give out few pointers and tips on how to ensure that the dog behaves when outside with distractions around.
Right. So see, first of all, as a trainer or a behaviorist, when you go to somebody's house, you teach them the basics of handling. You're going to
Right,
teach them how to hold the leash, you know,
right,
the proper manner in holding the leash when you're walking the dog out.
right,
So when you're walking the leash, like say the dog is jumping on somebody, if you're going to tug the dog,
correct,
you tug him and tell him to wait.
correct,
You need to teach the dog a focus command. So the dog learns when he focuses at you, he's rewarded.
right,
And you also need to teach him, like when you do not like something, you are going to also correct the dog or the puppy.
correct,
So it has
correct,
to be a balance of both. I mean,
right.
only positive doesn't work all the time.
That's true. Yeah,
you know so you have to learn how to balance both. The puppy
right.
also has to learn sometimes that there might be consequences. uh, for example,
To an
each
unwanted behavior.
yes, each dog has different drives that they exhibit.
Correct,
And some drives might be in excess with each puppy.
correct,
So learning how to curtail that is very important. And for the environment in which the dog is, you need to kind of train according to that.
right. That's
Like
true.
we have been mentioning, not every person or every household will be able to control a hyper dog, or
Right,
a dog with very high drive. So you
true.
as a trainer or a behaviorist has to teach that person to handle the dog properly in that environment.
Right. Makes sense. So, as Meera ma'am has also actually correctly pointed that behavior becomes a problem when it starts hurting humans physically. So that's another thing which is I think very true, because a lot of pet parents, a lot of pet owners, they do not realize that it's actually a problem, or it might turn out to be a big problem later, few months or few days down the line. Because initially, let's take a pup greeting us for example. So as you also mentioned, probably 30 days or 40 days old pup jumping on us, we find it too cute. But assume, let's say, a 40-month pup would be a cute golden retriever pup, would look cute jumping on us, and we
Right,
would also want to cuddle and pet the dog. But when the same pup will turn out to be probably 8 months or 10 months or a year old, then when a full grown golden retriever would be jumping and pouncing onto us, then it's going to get out of hand. And one day when someone will get hurt, either a young kid or probably someone who's aged, when they will probably fall with the push of the dog, that's when they will understand and realize that now it's becoming a problem and now it needs to be addressed. So early training is also another very important thing that needs to be considered. And another great pointer that she is listed over here is no trainer can do the tricks alone. We have to teach them, and all trainers work alongside owners. So that's another thing which I personally see now these days. A lot of dog trainers are now focusing more on training the handlers first, because training the dog is always easy. We can always do that because it will hardly take us what, probably a month or two. But it's the handlers training that is the most important, because we might get done with the pups or the dogs training in just a month or two, but eventually if the owners fail to understand what does the particular breed that they're having requires, the physical mental exercise requirement and everything, then it's all going to go down the drain. Because as soon as the trainer stops coming, it will eventually they will start again, so let's say seeing a lot of behaviors that have been worked on start to pop up again, and then it's going to be the same cycle, and again to again get in touch with the trainer and asking for help and stuff. So that is another thing that we need to concern. So
See,
another, yeah, you were trying to say something.
sorry. Yeah, see, I mean, we as a culture are not really pet friendly or not pet educated, you can say, Uh,
Right,
we do not do our research before getting dogs or any other animals.
right,
It's a whim or a fancy.
right,
In most houses, so when you go to their house, like you said, no, they don't know anything of the dog. They don't understand the dog breed, nothing. So it's very important for one, you as a dog owner or somebody who wants to get a dog, make sure you do your research properly before getting a dog. And as a professional, you need to go in and understand that dog. I mean, apart from just the breed there, understand what traits are there with the dog and help the whole family understand the dog and educate them on handling the dog properly. Just
correct.
not training the dog according to your purpose or need.
Right, correct, correct. So, another thing that I would, we would like to know your viewpoints on this. That how would you, suggest the pet owners and pet parents to help the dog or train the dog in a situation where they're walking through a crowd? So, for example, when they're in a dog park, or probably when they're outside a vet for a checkup and they're waiting for their turn to come up, or probably going to a pet fest, for example, pet fed, or any of the pet festival that they're attending, how to make sure that the dog behaves there, and how as a handler or a dog owner we are supposed to make sure that how we need to handle the situation and walk through the crowd without ensuring that there's no tiff or there's no dog fight happening, or what would be the best possible approach to when we're in that situation to go in for.
Right. See, now this is a systematic transition that needs to happen. While
Hmm.
training, when you start with puppy obedience, basic obedience, then you get into semi adulthood of the dog, where the dog also starts challenging you. So
Right.
after your basic obedience, when the puppy is like 4 months, 5 months old, he
Hmm.
starts learning his different drives that are there or his needs that are there according to nature. That's when he starts getting distracted.
Right.
you know so during this time your basic obedience has to be very firm and you need to make sure that you continue it properly, and then you
Correct.
get into the distraction phase,
Correct.
whereas slowly you'll be putting different type of distractions. You will start with least important things,
Hmm.
like just from his food, from his toy, then going on to small distractions in the environment, like say
Right.
people he knows, then maybe your
Right.
local market or just taking him outside your gate. you know
Right.
so slowly you need to get the puppy ready in a consistent manner and
Right.
gradually get him up to that point where he can walk comfortably in a big crowd with a lot of distractions. You
Right.
just can't take a dog directly and push him in there. you also
Definitely.
need to
Definitely.
you you also need to make sure the dog is not scared of sounds. You need to make him stable enough. There's a lot of things
Right.
that go into this process.
Right. Right. Correct. So let's say if at all you have to give us just few pointers, probably two three pointers on, let's say, with I as a pet parent, I have worked with my puppy inside the house with least distractions. In every situation where there is least distraction. So now, let's say as a pet parent, when I am going out and taking the dog on road, or probably in any crowded place, probably crossing the road, or outside the vet clinic, or in some pet friendly probably hotel or cafe or some place, how, like, if you could help us with just two three few tips on what we need to work on, and as a handler what we need to train the dog for, or probably what tips if you could give us on how to make sure that the dog just focuses on us and is not really bothered about where the dog is currently, which what sort of environment the dog is, but the dog is just focused on the handler.
Like I said, I mean, you need to start with a puppy that's really young. That's the best time to start.
Right.
And if you have
Right.
a nice young puppy with you, you start with a no bowl, no bowl food service. So basically, you're
Okay.
not giving the puppy any food in the bowl. Everything is
Okay.
hand fed, and most of
All
it is
right.
given to the dog when you are doing these type of exercises. So
Okay.
you're handling the dog when the dog is hungry, and he's going to be
Okay.
focused on you.
Okay.
And you have to get to the process where you wean the puppy off this. So it's
All
going to take
right.
you time again.
Definitely. Yeah. Makes sense.
And
All
it's
right.
that's the best way to go into it in a positive manner. Where you do not have to use any corrections or the least corrections that you can.
Obviously, in
Right?
order to make sure that we build all the enthusiasm and
Yes,
encourage the pup with, yeah, so that the pup
yes,
associates training with something positive.
yes. Like as a puppy, I mean, most puppies, they will generally work with food in a wonderful way up till they're 6 months.
True.
After that, they prefer their toy. So
Right.
you see what they kind of prefer, and then also you as a trainer need to understand, when to use the puppy's drive and when not to use the puppy's drive. And if
Correct.
you can educate your handler or the owner properly on that, then I think you solve most of your problems.
Right.
Now, but once
Okay.
again, when you're doing this, you need to be very slow and don't push it too much. Use
Right.
simple distractions to start with, and
Correct.
then gradually you increase it.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. So also, let's say this exact. I think this is exact the same sort of structure that we have to follow when we're working on the dog's obedience. So, for example, when we're teaching the dog basic commands like sit, down, and stay, that's, I think, the same pattern or protocol we have to follow. That initially, when we're just starting off with the dog, we have to make sure that we're using treats. We have to make sure that we're doing it, in least distraction inside the house, and then probably slowly and gradually introducing slight distractions like someone passing through, then probably doing it right outside the house, then probably taking the dog outside on main roads, heavy distractions. So again, how would you suggest, what would be the right process and right structure on teaching the dog sit, stay, and maintaining that with or without distraction, both sit and down, like slight basic commands that comes in handy on a regular basis.
I mean, these basic commands are super important because they come in use for everything,
Right.
from your house to crossing the road, or like you said, at the vet or anywhere else. You
Right.
know,
Right.
like we say, they are the ABCD of dog training.
Correct.
You
That's
know?
true.
Yeah. So you start with this at home with your puppy, and
Mm-hmm.
like we were talking earlier, make sure your puppy is sitting when people are coming home.
Okay.
You increase that time slowly. Then,
Right.
for if at all you're having your tea or you're eating something, make the puppy sit and stay.
Right.
Increase your timing slowly.
Right.
Gradually with that distraction.
Correct.
Then you move that distraction outside the house. Now,
Right.
first, I would always advise to kind of get it done in the house and then outside.
All right.
It'll be much better. I mean,
Right.
especially if it's your dog, you the owner, the trainer has come,
Right.
taught you something and gone. You
Right.
practice with your puppy at home properly, and
Right.
whenever possible, with your trainer or when you're kind of sure of it, then you move
Mm-hmm.
on to the next level.
Okay. All right.
And like we said, stay is kind of the most important command. I mean, for
Right.
me, in teaching the
Right.
puppy patience,
Right.
obviously with this, we kind of use the treats or the lure, like we call it in training. We
Mm-hmm.
use it in a way that we want the puppy to grow up into an adult. Like, say, if
Okay.
I'm using it for a working dog, I would
Mm-hmm.
use the treats very often to maintain the drive. you know if this is a house dog, I would
Mm-hmm.
make the treats less. I would kind of cut down the lure, uh, faster, much faster, and kind of get it more on love only,
Right.
in
Right.
in a faster way, so the
Right.
puppy is not over excited also.
Right.
So you need to make sure you understand your needs of the dog. I mean, why you have the dog there, and
Right.
what type of a temperament or a drive that you can control, or your
Correct.
family for that matter.
Correct, correct. Makes sense. Right. So, okay. So coming to another, very important topic is which is recall. So we again, as trainers, we often come across a lot of pet owners again coming to us with this, question that whenever the dog is outside, the dog is so distracted, and the dog just is so focused on other smells, or probably running behind other dogs, or probably meeting other people, that when we're trying to call back the dog, when we're trying to recall the dog doesn't really come back running to us. So again, if you could, help and guide us on few pointers on how to ensure that we do a positive recall and ensure that every time we're calling out the dog just, leaves everything and comes back running to us.
To start with, like, again, I mean, everything has to be done in the house. And also with, I mean, this is also a problem with pet owners. A lot of them, they would have dog parties, have their dogs meeting each other. When you engage in this type of behavior, the dog obviously prefers to play with another dog than you.
Right,
It's kind of natural. First of all,
right,
you need to learn to build a very strong drive with your puppy, a
correct,
bond. The
correct,
bond has to be really strong. Your pack drive has to be very strong.
right,
You know, So either you need to learn about it or ask your trainer how to teach you. You know, Make sure you are focused with the puppy when you go out. You're not on your phone. Most of the people, when you go out, they're either on their phone, not
right,
engaging with the puppy. So puppy is looking elsewhere. And why should the puppy
correct,
come when you call?
correct, correct,
I mean, you should interact. The puppy needs to see another dog in you.
right.
That's when it's
Makes
going to
sense.
interact. You need to be the toy. You need to be the treat for the puppy.
Right,
No, if you think it's going to be magic, it's not magic.
definitely. Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. I mean, you need to put that effort in. Then only the
Right,
dog will react to you in that way. And then,
correct,
like we
correct.
mentioned earlier, the best way to start is with food. You start with food, and like when if you're working with a puppy on a hungry stomach, 99% the puppy is going to do it.
Right,
And gradually, you go up the ladder in a slow process. You change
right,
it to toys, change it to something the puppy really likes, and you
right,
also have to be very energetic. Like
right.
we like mostly teaching the clients or the owners. It's about how to use your body language and your voice tone to make sure you're
True,
engaging with the puppy,
true.
because people generally don't see their dog like somebody who's got emotions, feelings. There's no, I call the dog should come to me. It's
Right,
not like
right.
that.
It doesn't work
So
that way. Yeah, that's
yes,
true.
yeah. So if you're going to show that engagement to the puppy, and one thing is, never correct the dog when it comes to you. The dog is never going to come back to you.
Right,
You know, a lot of people
right.
or pet parents have this habit. I mean, if the dog is not been coming, the dog comes back, they're going to smack the dog or shout at the dog.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true. That's true.
the dog is not going to want to come back to you after that.
That's true. Yeah.
No.
That's I think more of an unintentional error that a lot of pet owners
It,
make, because again they fail to understand the technicalities of it. So obviously that's a very valid point, that a lot of pet owners, obviously because of probably lack of understanding, or probably this technical, these are basic technicalities, which a lot of pet trainers or dog trainers would know. But again, pet owners will eventually, after working with a lot of trainers, they'd be able to realize that when as you mentioned, that when the dog is coming to us, no matter, even if it was after 5 minutes of shouting and 5 minutes of pleasing the dog, that please come, if the dog has come to us, we have to reward the coming behavior at the end of the day,
Exactly,
instead of
exactly.
probably smacking the dog or hitting the dog. So yes, that's
Right,
actually a very very valid point, because once we do that, that's when the dog actually understands, and dog starts to relate that, oh okay, coming back to my owner is something very much rewarding and very much positive, because every time I come back to running back to my owner, it's like a full on party time, that they
right,
pet me also, then they probably toss few pieces of chicken or treats as well, then they play extra round of fetch with me. So instead of just running around, sniffing different smells and trying to explore around, it's best that I engage with my handler. And I think that's a very important factor when it comes to training in general, because we need to understand that we have to be, as you also mentioned, that we have to be interesting for the dog. So no one, as a kid, I also was never fond of sitting and studying 2 hours mathematics, or for 3 hours and so. But for dogs similarly, we have to make sure that they enjoy training. So we have to make sure that even if we've kept a short session for probably 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it has to be engaging and fun for the dog. So that dog, it's like, oh, it was just the for 10 minutes I wasn't being trained, I was like, my owner was just engaging with me and playing with me. So they don't take it as a formal training session where we're being basically, probably too loud or trying to give too many corrections. The dog should definitely enjoy it. And if the dog is enjoying it, I think, be it a basic command like sit down, stay, be it recall, be it basic, healing while walking, anything is possible and achievable with the dog. So that is another, very important thing. But let's say when we're talking about recall, there's another big challenge that a lot of pet owners face, is how they react when there are other dogs in the picture. So probably if I'm taking, as a pet owner, if I'm taking my dog to a nearby park, and if the park is empty, there is still probably 70% or 80% success rate that if I have treats in my hand, or probably the dog's favorite toy in my hand, and if I try and call the dog would come running. But in case there are other dogs in the picture, probably other pet dogs or street dogs in the picture, then probably the dog might not come back and would instead, prefer roaming around and, just beating the other dog. So again, like, what would your views be on it, and what would your tips be on how to ensure that the dog responds even when there are other dogs, as distractions around?
First of all, I mean, like I said, we do not have a proper pet culture over here where
Right.
people continue their pet training for a long period of time. Like, I do not know if you have witnessed it as a trainer yourself. When you're
Mhm.
out in the field, people will train for 1 month, 2 months, and after that, they'll probably get fed up or they don't want to do it any longer. Even where practice is concerned, they'll
Right.
practice for a while, and then after that, they stop. So all
Right.
these behaviors will only change, when you kind of practice with your dog daily.
Right.
You're actually doing it on a daily basis. Don't expect your
Right.
dog to come back to you once in a while when you go to a park and suddenly
Right.
he sees other dogs which are much more exciting to him. Why should he
Right.
come to you?
Right.
Why should he come to you?
Right.
So basically, your training and your interaction with your dog, if it's done on a daily base, then you will not have this issue. I mean, it's going to be
Right.
almost 99% not there. It again
Peace.
comes down to your practice with the dog.
Right.
Like like I said, I mean, we expect magic from the dogs, which doesn't
Right.
happen.
Right.
Now I believe you are into sport training also.
Right.
It
Yes.
takes uh, time to get up to a certain level with the dog, which a common person doesn't understand. They think it's
Right.
like as a trainer, you do magic with
Right.
the dog, and the dog is going to do everything.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and also, like I said, most of our people are not educated on the dog. Like we tell our clients, a dog is always going to be that his mind is always going to be that of a 3-year-old child. You know,
Correct.
and evaluate the dog according to that. The
Right.
simple things like that people don't realize. They think
Right.
just because the dog has grown in body and size, he has to listen.
Right.
You know, then
Correct.
also
Yeah.
like people don't kind of get the age distinction in a dog. Like we tell people the first year of a dog. is 16 equal to us,
Right.
The second year is
Okay.
9, and every after that is 5 or 7, whatever you want. But it's very important to understand that the first year is super important for a dog where training is concerned. You, as a pet owner, need to keep up 100%. Then only you're going to get that dog that you want or you imagine. You need to
Right.
engage with your dog. You need to bond with your dog, practice with your dog.
Right.
That's when things are going to happen.
True. That's true. That's true. So we will come on our last and final pointer, which is supervised separation. So we'll just discuss about it before we take up the start taking up the questions of all the viewers. So what would you suggest? The basic tips on how to train the dog for supervised separation. So, for example, if again, for a situation, if, for example, I'm training my dog to be comfortable when I am not inside. So, for example, I have taken my dog for a walk, and then, for example, I have to go into a supermarket or a general store to probably fetch few things, and I am with my staff or with my help or with my friend or with my brother, and I have to make sure that I am the main handler, but now for probably for next couple of minutes I have to hand over my dog to a second handler. So how to make sure that I train my dog so that my dog doesn't display all of separation anxiety sort of behaviors, that oh shit, my main handler has left me, I don't want to particularly walk with this human or stay with this human even for 5 minutes. So how do we work around that, and how do we train dog for that?
I think where basic anxiety is concerned, you start with kind of teaching your puppy to use a crate properly.
Correct.
Crate training is very very important for houses that people don't kind of understand. Uh, when you crate train your puppy, automatically you teach the puppy to stay alone for a while. You
Mhm.
know, this will kind of help you with a lot of other things if done properly.
Right.
Now, coming to the thing that you were mentioning, like when you're going for a walk and you
Hmm.
want to go to a supermarket or whatever, and you leave your dog outside with somebody else. This is again
Right.
part of training where it has to be done on a gradual basis.
Right.
You start, and conditioning is the key for this. You start with your basic obedience again. It's like you take one step at a time. Again, the effort has to be there 100%. Once you teach your
Correct.
dog to sit, to stay down, you increase the timing, then probably you go out of sight for a little time. This
Right.
matters a lot. Like you
Right.
keep on doing this. Like this has to be practiced on a daily basis. Then only you get to the stage where you can go away for 5-10 minutes, and the dog is not going
Correct.
to be bothered because he knows you're going to come back.
Correct. 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 Yeah. So it
And
has to
obviously,
be
when
an
you kind of come
ongoing
back,
training process, basically. Yeah.
yes, it's not something which will happen overnight. You know,
Right. Right.
So this is all part
Correct.
of training, like we said. I mean, needs to go on from the time the puppy is very young, right up
Right.
till he's 1 or 2 years old.
All right. Okay. Correct. Correct. So I'll start taking few questions. Actually, there are a lot of people who are asking some related questions. So our first question is from Aniket. He's asking, sir, I have a golden retriever, Mojo. Now he's 2.5 month old. At what age exactly can I start his training?
The best time to start training is around 3.5 to 4 months, which is around uh, between 12 weeks and 16 weeks.
Right.
So that's the best time you start training when the puppy is going to be focused on what you have with you.
Right. Correct. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So that's the answer to your question, Aniket. And I think it's also, as he correctly mentioned, that it's the formal training. Probably the best time to start off with is probably 3 to 4 months of age. But informal training, the main handler training should start as soon as we get the pup home. So, for example, me as a just a general pet owner, if I'm getting a puppy, 2.5 month old puppy home today, it's best that I start with basic stuff like toilet training, basic do's and don'ts, very very general, not like a formal training of probably training the dog for basic sits and all, but in general informal training, that the dog is supposed to maintain some boundaries, the dog should know what is expected from the puppy, from like what the pet owners would be expecting. For example, waiting for the food bowl for just initial few seconds when we're putting the food bowl down and not jumping around on us. So I think that informal training can, start off once we, as soon as we get the pup home, and then eventually once we feel that the dog is now settling down and has started to bond with us, then probably, as you rightly mentioned, that around 3 to 4 months of age, we can start off with the actual formal training too.
Yeah, see, actually, training, I mean, you need to go and get advice from a professional before you get a puppy. That's the best
Right,
way to start it.
right,
Then you don't have a problem with your potty training, your house
correct,
breaking.
correct,
You'll cover all these issues with that professional.
right, right, correct. All right. So we have another question by Gaurav Chawla. He's asking, please share some good tricks to keep our dogs busy, basically.
To keep your dog busy. I mean, you need to
Yes. Any
exercise
tricks
your
or
dog.
commands, basically, in general? Yeah.
You need to exercise your dog.
Right.
If you can jog with your dog, that's the best way. You will
Okay.
be active also, and so will your dog. You know,
Okay.
Otherwise you can play. There are a lot of games you can play in the house. You play hide and seek with him, hide his toys, hide his
Right.
food. In that, he'll
Right.
also learn to use his nose.
Right. Basic
You
treasure
know,
hunt games.
yes, treasure hunting. You take different toys that he likes, teach him
Right.
to identify different articles with that.
Correct.
Like
Correct.
his different toys. You can teach him different article identification, and then
Right.
ask him to go and search for those articles.
Right.
You know,
All right. So we have another question by Mr. Warish. He's asking, please send some training tricks. I have Beagle around 5 months old.
See, honestly, there are no tricks in training. It's more about being consistent with your dog. Make sure you follow a proper basic obedience routine. If you have
Right.
a professional around you, that's the best way to go about it. Find the right professional and make sure you
Mm-hmm.
follow what that person tells you on a daily basis.
Okay. All right.
Also, your puppy is just nearing semi-adulthood, where he's going to be very stubborn. So, basic obedience is very important for you right now.
Right. Okay. All right. So the next question is by Mona Lisa. She's asking, is the pandemic, oh sorry, in the pandemic, when we are not entertaining as many guests, how can one best get a puppy trained or greeting new people and remaining calm with seeing people?
It's a little confusing because when you don't have guests coming, you can't go out. You know, how are you going to get people to greet the dog or the dog to greet people? I mean, you have to take the
Yes.
puppy outside. You have to take the puppy outside, maybe in the building. They just sit down, let the puppy see people going. You do not need to meet people. Just let him get used to crowds. I mean, although there'll not be so much of crowds now, at least let him get used to different environments. Don't only keep him in the house. I'm sure
Right.
every society allows their dogs to go down now, at least most of the societies.
Mhm. Right, correct. So I think yes, we can probably use. Obviously, we cannot create a complete situation where there's a party going on, or probably because obviously the current pandemic situation, we cannot have too many guests in the house. But probably we can start off with basics. So as you know, Delano has mentioned earlier also in the session that we have to start with very basic and small steps. So probably we can start off with just having one person in distraction and in the background while we're training the dog. So probably that we can practice for another 2 3 weeks, and by the time, we just hope the situation gets better and you can get in two more people in the picture. Or probably now, as compared to, let's say, when we just started off with the lockdown situation. So if we compare August with March, now comparatively, there's no lockdown. We still have now, that much of freedom to walk around, at least in our society, or to the nearby store and stuff. So we can probably take the dog outside, as he correctly mentioned that over there we can, not inside the house we might have, but outside we can have a lot of distraction. But then again, it comes down to the same thing, that we have to first make sure that the dog is first trained indoors. So that is something, probably, yes, if probably I think if she's finding it difficult to get too many people in the house at this point of time, I think this would be a perfect time to probably work on other commands. And then probably with time, with situation, after probably another month or two, or probably by the end of the year, once the whole this COVID situation is also better, and once we get back to our normal, the usual normal lifestyle, then probably we can work on all of these issues, like how to ensure that the dog behaves when there's a party going on, or when there are a lot of guests that are coming in. So I think we, obviously, because of pandemic, we there are a lot of restrictions in terms of training dogs or taking our dogs outdoors and stuff. So we that is
I,
a slight drawback. But yeah, you I
yeah,
think you want
I,
to say
I
something
think
as
just
well.
work with basic distractions, like say your toys in your house that you have for the dog. You teach a puppy to sit and stay. The pup should not move
Right,
when you throw your toys around. No, just the pup should
right,
learn that he should not move to any distraction at all, no matter what. You
right,
moving chairs around, whatever it might
right,
be. Automatically, the puppy
right,
learns to kind of not be distracted and to behave
right,
when distraction is around. So you can
right.
take that out whenever you can later.
Correct, correct. All right. So we'll come to the next question, which is uh, by Sudipto. He's asking, hello, I have a query that after feeding my 3 months old Labrador puppy, he doesn't want to go for potty or anywhere. Even he becomes so lazy that he doesn't want to stand. Even I wait for 5-10 minutes, then also he doesn't want to stand. Why is it so?
Are you feeding too much? He's just lazy. I
Yeah,
think you need to take him out or take him to the area where you need him to do potty. Generally, what I suggest is I always suggest my people to have kind of a treat box in the potty area, just kept over there. And that should be something really special, especially for puppies. So when you take him there, he knows that when he does it, he's going to get that special treat or something that he never gets always. So he himself
right,
will be interested.
right, correct.
You
Yeah,
you
so
try
I
that with
think
him every time.
right, right. So I think probably you will have to, for better understanding, you can either get in touch with Delano through his, website or his social media handles, or probably, I'm not too sure where you're based. You can probably try and get in touch with a trainer nearby, and take his or the trainer's guidance basically on how to train the dog for toilet training. And just to there's someone who's also mentioned that you will have to first get him checked medically as well. So obviously you'll have to probably see if there's no underlying medical cause because of which probably the dog is not pooping enough. So if it's not that, if the vet gives you a green signal, then probably it has more to do with the training. And then probably it's best to get in touch with the trainer so that they can help you with the exact routine and the do's and don'ts and the proper system on how to make sure and how to help you on how to toilet train your dog. So we'll move on to the next question, which is by Lalita. So she's asking, do you absolutely need a leash to train a dog?
See, for basic obedience, you don't need a leash when you start with a puppy. It's not necessary. But once you move further, it is a must to have a leash because it teaches the
Right,
puppy to be subordinate to you,
right,
and you can't, it's also safety for the puppy once you're on the road.
correct,
Like we said,
true,
dogs have their natural instincts, their drives. Keeping all that in mind, a leash is very important.
right, okay. So that answers your question, Lalita. The next question is by Rohit Agarwal. He's asking, not sure if the question is relevant for the session, but would still ask. I'm a pet photographer based out of Bangalore. How do I win the trust of a dog and get into its dog's comfort zone, who I have just met for the session? Do asking some questions to the pet parents about the dog prior to the session help? Please shed some light on this.
Well, one is you should have a lot of treats with you, exciting treats.
Right,
Maybe chicken, pork. Uh, it depends on if you can or not, and have a lot of
right,
toys with you. Make sure you
right,
can change your vocals a lot.
right,
It's very important to be very vocal with a dog, a
right,
puppy. Make sure you understand body language. Make sure you know how to use your body language to excite the puppy. That
right,
is very important. Some dogs are intimidated when you're standing, so you need to get down to their level.
right,
If you're sitting down, they're more comfortable. Some
right,
dog might probably bite you if you go down to their level. So you need to
right,
understand dog body language first, and
right,
then use your body language according to that to excite the dog also.
right. Okay. All right. So we'll move to our next question, which is by Mitali. She's asking, I've got two pups in these COVID times. Best way to socialize is to make family members meet neighbors if all is well around your surroundings. I think it's more of like an answer to the previously asked question by someone. I took my lap pup down during no human times. There's a slight movement in the society, but not on roads. So yeah, this is more
Right,
of like an answer.
right.
But no, but she has another question. How do I teach stand and heel command? These are two things my lap pup refuses to pick up. He has learned other basic commands like sit, down, stay, jump. He is a very loving dog, lovely with my daughter's suggestions, please.
Yeah, sure. First of all, where are you based? If you have somebody around you, this will be really perfect for somebody to come over and teach you. But when you start your heel, you can always use treats in your hand, for the dog to follow your hand, and then slowly kind of lure him and nudge him with the leash to follow you properly. You need to know how to coordinate both these things together to teach the dog to heel.
Right,
So it's important. I mean, if somebody is up front or you can see somebody doing it, then it'll be much better for you to understand how to do it.
good, right. Okay. So I think also for these two commands, I think like for basic stuff, you can start off with luring as well. So you can probably hold some food in your hand and just lure the dog into the position. So let's say if you want to teach the dog the heel command, you have food in your hand and you're just trying to lure the dog into the heel position, and then you're just slowly walking probably 2 steps or 3 steps or 4 steps into that position, and immediately once you feel that the dog is matching your pace and walking right beside you, you can immediately mark it by using a verbal cue and just reward the dog right there. So once you start doing it after a couple of repetitions, the dog will eventually start to understand what heel means. And similarly, like I think you're also asking about the stand command. So for that, again, if your dog already, as you've mentioned also that your dog already knows sit and down. So from sit, you can lure the dog into the stand position by gently, tapping the dog's belly. So the dog stands. The moment the dog stands, you can again mark it with a verbal cue, like for example, yes or okay, and feed the dog. Similarly, from down, you can just push the dog slightly upwards. The moment the dog stands, you can again just mark it and give treat to the dog. So obviously, in just one or two, with just one or two commands, or with just following this for a day or two, it is not possible to completely train the dog for these commands. So it has to go on for a couple of days, with n number of repetitions. That's only when you'd be able to communicate it clearly to the dog what you're expecting. And I would also suggest you to follow practice both of these commands separately. So when you're working on just the stand command, just practice stand like 2 to 5 minutes, just practice stand with him. And when you're working on the heel command, just for 2 to 5 minutes practice heel with your dog, so don't miss it. So after I think good probably 7 to 8 to 10 to 15, it depends from dog to dog, your dog will eventually get the hang of both the commands and will eventually start to respond when you verbally start to ask the dog to perform or stand, or get into the heel position and do a heel command. So she's also saying, yes, I do that. Tap his tummy to stand. Thank you. I think practice, yes, definitely. So practice will definitely, make it perfect, because with dogs, we have to make sure that we keep the sessions as short and crisp as possible, and the number of repetitions needs to be higher for the dog to understand. So there's another question, Delano, which Pooja Bhatia is asking. She's asking, is neutering beneficial if you are not into breeding?
I think it's practical in a social environment, especially the way we live in our cities. It is very
Hmm.
practical to do.
Right,
If you ask me practical, yes. If you're asking me about the scientific side of it, it's best to check with a vet. But when we talk about having puppies in society that are neutered, it works much better because a male dog, for example, a male dog exhibits a lot of different behaviors once he starts to mature, which
right,
you might not understand. Maybe he turns hyper, maybe he turns aggressive, and you do not know why that's happening.
right,
If
correct,
you are of somebody or you are not into training, you do not have the time to train your dog properly, I would advise you neuter your dog.
okay. And
If
also,
not,
with, sorry, yeah, please continue.
yeah, if not, even if you have your dog trained properly and you can manage your dog it properly, it's not necessary to do.
Correct, right. And we've also shared with you, Pooja, we've also shared with you the link of the live session where we talked about neutering the dogs and what would be the pros and cons. So you can probably just tap on the link here to get more details on how to go about it, right? And so I think that's it for today. We've covered most of the questions, and yeah, that's it for now. So thank you so much, Delano. It was great having you, and thank you all the viewers also to join in. I mean, for joining in. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. If you did, and for all of those also who joined pretty late and couldn't join us on time at sharp 6 o'clock, you can also watch the recorded version of the live session on DogSpot's handle. And for those who want certain more, slightly more guidance on in terms of your dog's training or your dog's behavior, you can also reach out to Delano directly on his website, which for which I've just shared the link. And you can also reach out to his handles as well. And I think once he understands the breed, the requirements that you have in terms of what exactly you need to work on in terms of training and behavior, and once he understands all of your requirements, then I think he'd be able to make the structure for you and guide and assist you better. If you're based out of Mumbai, then I think you can just get in touch with him and get a session booked with him, and that's I think it's going to be much more helpful, and he'd be able to explain everything in much more detail and with demonstrations as well. So thank you everyone for joining in. We also have another live session lined up for tomorrow, which is about separation anxiety. So if you enjoyed today's session and if you feel that that is something you would want to know more about, and if at all your dogs are experiencing separation anxiety, do tune in tomorrow as well. It's at if I'm not wrong, it's I think at 6 p.m. So thanks a lot, everyone, and stay home, stay safe. Thank you, Delano. Thanks a lot for joining
Thank
in.
you. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay.